thoughts. Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts. Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Hey everybody, welcome to Analog Thoughts. I am your host, Steven, aka Mount Analogue. I hope you are having a glorious, glorious week. At the very beginning of these episodes, I like to impart a little bit of wisdom, I guess, or just some inspirational nugget of knowledge. Before I started today's episode, I spent about an hour troubleshooting some technical stuff, and I kind of was looking to take a different approach at how I record audio. Nothing was broken. I just was like, what if I did this? What if I did this? And it was a huge headache. So I guess the nugget of knowledge I want to impart today is feel free to explore and try new things, but also, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Also, at the beginning of these episodes, I like to do a little bit of a life update just to let everybody know where I'm at in my personal life and stuff like that. If you're just here to hear about today's topic and you want to skip my life updates and my brain puke, feel free to skip forward to the 4-minute and 55-second mark. For those of you that do want to stick around and listen to my brain puke, I'm going to keep it brief. So first off, I've been doing swim lessons with my son Felix, and he's finally starting to level out with them. He's actually loving them and enjoying them. And the irony is that there's only one left. Up until this point, they've been a little rough. He's been a little overwhelmed in the pool, which I can't blame him. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to learn. You're in the water, and it's just a really intense experience. So we've got one left for this tier of swim lessons, and I'll probably sign him up for the next tier, and we'll keep going, and he'll hopefully continue to enjoy it. He's learning so much, and I am so proud of him. With me personally, I actually got booked as a DJ at a St. Patrick's Day party, and for the record, I'm not really a DJ. I don't really consider what I do as DJing, but someone saw me do an actual performance a little while back, and they were like, yo, could you come play some Celtic music at our St. Patrick's Day party? So like I said, I don't really consider myself a DJ. I do live performances with keyboards and drum machines and my looper and stuff. So I spent some time collecting different genres of Celtic music and getting playlists together. And I did the dang thing. I was a DJ at the St. Patrick's Day party at the Dayton Library, at one of the Dayton libraries in this theater space. And there were mocktails and people danced and ate food. And honestly, it was a very unexpected gig that I got, but I'm really happy that I agreed to do it. And it was a lot of fun. That was on Monday, on St. Patrick's Day. So I pretended to be a DJ, and it honestly went really well. I was proud of myself for that one. And next Friday, I'm actually playing a performance in Dayton with all my gear and stuff, and that is going to be a fundraiser for trans rights, and all the proceeds are going to go to Trans Ohio. Because as you know, our ignorant orange overlord here in America is quickly stripping away the rights of many groups of people, so it's important for us to support how we can and do what we can to be a resistance to that. So come out if you're in the area. Last thing about me I'm going to talk about, just wanted to burn through some of my life update stuff today. I've been click-clacking away on my book. I got a second or a third wind, whatever you want to call it, and my progress has been pretty steady. And it seems like I'm aligned to hit my mark of finishing this first draft before the beginning of May. Very, very excited about that. I know there's going to be infinite rewrites and edits, but having the first draft completed is the first step. And I'm almost there. I am getting there. So do a little toast for your boy, because I'm writing my first book, and it's been a lot of work. And that's going to conclude my life updates for today. Let's put that behind us. We did it. We did the dang thing. You know a little bit about what's been going on with me. I hope you've been well. I hope you've been achieving all of your goals. I hope everything in your life has been smooth and you've just been rolling with confidence and exuding positivity and helping people in your sphere. I hope the sun has just been shining on you. One last thing before we officially get going with today's topic. On whatever platform you're listening to this on, there is a way to leave a review, a like, a comment, a rating, subscribe, all of that jazz. If you could click-clack those buttons, that would seriously help me out a ton. It helps get this podcast in front of more people. And if you want to take supporting this podcast just a step further, I have a Patreon where I share early access to music and early access to these episodes and early access to art and other things like that. The link to that will be in the show's notes. Okay, let's get into the reason you are here. Today we are talking about secret labs that changed the world. And all of these places today are hush-hush, or they were, some of them still are, but they were hush-hush hubs where world-changing discoveries happened behind closed doors, guarded gates, and sometimes in the middle of nowhere. So grab your clearance badges, buckle up, because we're about to sneak into some of the world's most classified laboratories. The first one I want to talk about is a place called Bletchley Park. And this place was a quaint Victorian estate in Buckinghamshire, England. From the outside, Bletchley Park looked like a fancy country house where rich people would sip tea and discuss the weather and lounge about and be wealthy. But during World War II, this innocent-looking mansion became home to Britain's code and cipher school, and the workplace of about 10,000 people dedicated to breaking enemy codes. I've talked about it on the podcast before, and you've probably heard about it before. During World War II, the Germans were using super encrypted and air quote unbreakable codes to communicate with each other. So deciphering these codes was really paramount to stopping them. If you've seen the Intimidation game or read about Alan Turing, who is another person I've talked about on the show before, I've talked about on the episode about supercomputers, I talked about Alan Turing coming up with the Turing machine and how the Turing machine became sort of the modern computer. But if you listen to that episode, you've heard a little bit about Bletchley Park. A lot of his research happened there. But a lot of this research that happened during World War II actually remained classified until the 1970s for obvious reasons. And some of the things that happened there weren't fully declassified until the 1990s. Even the people working there, they weren't allowed to even tell their families about anything they were doing until decades after the war ended. Probably the most famous achievement at Bletchley was breaking the German Enigma code. The Germans created this encryption machine that could scramble messages into billions of possible combinations, and they thought it was, like I said, quote, air quote here, unbreakable. And they were obviously wrong about this. Alan Turing and his team created the bombe, B-O-M-B-E, which was an electromechanical machine that could rapidly test different possible Enigma settings. And these machines, they were loud, they were clunky, they were things that filled entire rooms, and they sounded like ticking bombs, hence the name The Bomb. One of the really cool things about Bletchley Park and all the work that they did is that women made up about 75% of the workforce there. So while names like Alan Turing get the spotlight, there were actually thousands of women that worked as operators, translators, and analysts. Many were recruited from women's colleges, and the powers that be often looked for chess champions and crossword puzzle experts. people with analytical minds who could spot patterns. The work at Bletchley Park is estimated to have shortened World War II by 2 to 4 years, potentially saving millions of lives. And all of this happened in this lavish mansion. Many of the workers there called it the golf club when asked where they worked. Super secret, super hidden, but also hidden in plain sight. It kind of makes you wonder what buildings we pass on a daily basis or what buildings we see that we don't really know the goings-ons of. There's a lot of buildings like that in Dayton, I feel like, and I live relatively close to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is it's the third, I believe it's the third largest Air Force base in the United States. And I often drive past buildings around that area and even around my area where I'm like, I wonder what's going on in there. I wonder what kind of technology or research development or I wonder what's there are mysterious buildings in Dayton, Ohio. Potentially some Bletchley Park lookalikes. Moving on to our second super secret lab. Not only is it super secret, this one's also rad, dude. This one's called the Rad Lab. And while the Brits were busy cracking codes, Americans were cooking up their own secret scientific stew at the MIT Radiation Laboratory, and it was affectionately known as the Rad Lab. When I think of the MIT Radiation Laboratory, I get visions of like radioactive monsters or superhero origins and stuff like that. But unfortunately, those aren't as far as we know, those weren't the type of things they were doing or researching there. The Rad Lab was established in 1940 and it focused primarily on developing microwave radar technology. The name was actually chosen as a clever bit of misdirection. They wanted potential spies to think that they were working on nuclear research, which was happening elsewhere. It's kind of like naming your cat Killer or something really vicious, and when in actuality your cat's just a fluffy ball, a floof ball that sleeps most of the day. This is what they were going for. They wanted to misdirect anyone who might be looking to infiltrate areas of American research. Before the war, radar existed, but it was really primitive. And the Rad Lab revolutionized it by developing systems that could detect aircraft at longer distances and with much greater accuracy. And by the end of the war, they had designed over 100 different radar systems. These were used for air defense, bombing through clouds, submarine detection, and even helping ships navigate in poor visibility. At its peak, the Rad Lab employed nearly 4,000 people and occupied 20 buildings. And despite its size, many MIT students at the time had no idea what was happening in those buildings right on their own campus. And again, this kind of just makes you wonder what goes on in the buildings around us that seem mysterious or empty or we don't know what function they serve. Another fascinating thing about the Rad Lab is how quickly it assembled and dissolved. It didn't exist before October 1940, and it grew to become one of the largest research centers in the world, and then completely shut down by the end of 1945. It's kind of a pop-up lab in terms of being a sophisticated lab for it to be built and then torn down in a matter of 5 years after doing some of the world's most intense radar research, if not the most intense. That's insanely fast. Not only did these radar technologies that they developed, not only did they win the war, they also transformed civilian life afterwards. Modern air traffic control, microwave ovens, and advanced weather forecasting all have roots in Rad Lab research. So the next time your flight lands safely in fog, or you are heating up cold pizza or a burrito or whatever in the microwave, you can thank the scientists at MIT at the Rad Lab. We're cruising through these labs. I want to talk about the next one, Los Alamos. And now, let us journey to the high desert mesas of New Mexico, where in 1943, the U.S. government decided to build an entire secret city. And when I say secret, I mean it wasn't on any maps. Mail addressed to residents who lived there went to a P.O. box in Santa Fe, and scientists who moved there told friends and family they were doing, quote, war work somewhere in the vague expanse of the American Southwest. Very large, very secret. This was Los Alamos. And it had a code name. The code name was Site Y. Sometimes it was referred to as just the Hill. And you've heard about what they've done there. You've probably watched movies about what they've done there. Everyone knows about what their research was there. They were building the world's first atomic bombs under the Manhattan Project. And what happened was the government essentially took over a boys' ranch school, rapidly expanded it, and turned it into a scientific town. And the collective brain power that they brought out there to this taken over boys ranch was unprecedented. It's kind of like if you took all of the Nobel Prize winners, all of the scientific Nobel Prize winners, and stuck them in one place, in one lab, in the middle of the desert. So even though it was this highly sophisticated lab, the actual infrastructures in which they were living kind of sucked. There was bad plumbing, there was food shortages because it was such a remote location. So although they were doing research in these super sophisticated lab environment, they weren't living the best. It kind of sucked to be out there. The scientific director was another person you've heard of, J. Robert Oppenheimer. He was a brilliant theoretical scientist who would later famously quote the Bhagavad Gita after the first successful nuclear test. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Another reason that living at Los Alamos was so rough is because a lot of the living structures were hastily constructed because they wanted this research to happen quickly. They wanted these minds on this project as fast as possible. It's another big reason that things were so uncomfortable for these scientists. Another really notable thing about Los Alamos was how information was compartmentalized. Many scientists working on specific components of the project had no idea what the overall project was until it was almost completed. For obvious reasons, a lot of scientists didn't want their research and technology to be used to create weapons, even though once they were so deep, they put it together. Some of them, I'm sure, put it together sooner than others. Some of them probably put it together before they even went out there. But a lot of them were told what they were doing wasn't what it was for, or they were told nothing, and they were just saying, we need you to complete X, Y, and Z. And then other scientists who did know what was going on would put those pieces of the puzzle together to work on the bomb. A little fun fact about babies born in Los Alamos. Babies born in Los Alamos had P.O. Box 1663, Santa Fe, New Mexico, listed as their birthplace on their birth certificates. So anytime they had to put their birthplace on something like a college application or anything like that, that's the address they had to put, a P.O. Box. Where were you born? I was born in a P.O. Box in Santa Fe. Don't worry about it. The scientists at Los Alamos created not only the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also began grappling with the ethical implications of their work. Many became advocates for nuclear arms control after seeing the devastating power that they had unleashed. And after the war, Los Alamos transitioned from a secret military installation to a national laboratory that continues to operate today. And unlike the Rad Lab, this pop-up city, this pop-up shop decided to stay around. And they eventually updated the infrastructure and everything, and the lab now works on everything from renewable energy to supercomputing, although it started with weapons. That's its legacy. Moving on, we continue with the theme of secret cities. And I want to talk about the secret cities of the Soviet Union, kind of a tongue twister. And while the Americans were hiding their nuclear scientists in the desert, the Soviets took secretive science to a whole new level with their, quote, closed cities. These secret cities were completely closed off from the rest of the world and often not appearing on any public maps until the 1990s. Instead of names, these cities were known only by code names and postbox numbers like Arzamaz 16 or Chelyabinsk 70. The most famous of these closed cities was, and I'm going to butcher this name, Akademgorodok, which is translated to Academic City, which is what I'm going to be calling it, in Siberia. It was founded in 1957, and it was less militarized than some other closed cities and focused on basic scientific research. Think of it kind of like the Soviet version of Silicon Valley, except with a lot more snow and a lot less tech douches. Probably still a lot of tech douches, I don't know. Academic City housed dozens of research institutes covering everything from nuclear physics to genetics. And during the Cold War, it was one of the few places in the Soviet Union where scientists enjoyed relatively free exchange of ideas, at least by Soviet standards. It was like their version of a scientific utopia. I guess utopia isn't the right word, but it's somewhere they could live. It's somewhere scientists could live. They could talk to each other about science, and they had funding to explore their research and develop technologies. It was kind of like a playground city for scientists. Not exactly, it's a little more rough than that, but you get what I'm saying. So even though these scientists got to live in these cities and they got to explore their research and develop technologies how they saw fit, there was this strange mixture of both privilege and restriction. Because if you lived in one of these cities, if you were a resident, you couldn't freely leave or invite visitors. But unlike places like Los Alamos or other pop-up scientific research facilities, people in these cities, they had better housing, better food, consumer goods than even an average Soviet city. So they were kind of balling out on the inside. They couldn't leave, couldn't invite people in. Security was super strict, but they were very well taken care of as they did their research. And the Soviets achieved remarkable scientific breakthroughs in these cities. They developed nuclear weapons, they pioneered aspects of space technology, and made advances in mathematics and computer science. For instance, the Soviet BESM-6 computer, which was developed in one of these cities in the 1960s, was compared to the best American supercomputers of the time. For our final destination, we're heading somewhere that makes all these other secret spots look positively accessible. We're going to Antarctica, the coldest, windiest, and most isolated continent on Earth. And while Antarctic research stations aren't secret in the classified sense, they're certainly remote enough to qualify as hidden from the rest of humanity. And the science happening there is critically important to understanding in everything from climate change to extraterrestrial life. There's a place called Vostok Station operated by Russia. It sits near the South Geomagnetic Pole and recorded the lowest naturally occurring temperature on Earth, which was negative 128.6 degrees Fahrenheit in 1983. That's actually cold enough to freeze your breath as it leaves your mouth, and then you could watch your breath then fall to the ground. That's how cold that is. That is unfathomably cold. But Vostok's real claim to fame is its location above Lake Vostok, which is a massive subglacial lake that has been completely isolated from the outside world for somewhere between 13,000 to 14, a massive subglacial lake that had been completely isolated from the outside world for potentially up to 14 million years. And scientists have drilled down to study this pristine environment. And I say pristine because it's been isolated for so long, untouched and frozen in time. And what they do when they drill down is they look for unique microorganisms that might give us clues about how life could survive in similar environments on icy moons like Europa. And what this does is help us understand what environments on those moons and other planets might be like, and also allows us to develop technologies that could withstand those conditions off of Earth. Another Antarctic facility is this place called the American Amundsen Scott South Pole Station, which sits right at the geographic South Pole. It is so remote that it's only accessible for about 3 months during the Antarctic summer. And for the rest of the year, personnel are completely isolated. No flights in or out due to extreme cold and darkness. And this station at the South Pole is home to the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. And what this is essentially a cubic kilometer of Antarctic ice that is equipped with thousands of sensors looking for nearly massless subatomic particles called neutrinos. And this observatory is already helping scientists understand some of the most energetic phenomena in the universe. That's so crazy to me. Putting sensors on ice and looking for particles here on Earth, it's wild. It's wild. It's wild how much we know about science and understand reality, and then on the opposite side of that, how much we don't. That's the real mind-blowing piece of it all. Life at these stations is both high-tech and primitive. Scientists have internet access and sophisticated equipment, but they also deal with extreme isolation, months of darkness, and the psychological challenges that come with being cut off from the world. It's kind of like a spaceship simulation. It even comes with dying if you go outside unprepared. And I think Metallica played. Did Metallica play? They might have played at this one. I don't know. I need to Google that. I know Metallica's played on every continent, including Antarctica. So this might be the place they played. Somebody look that up and send me a message. Antarctic research gives us crucial data about Earth's climate history through ice cores. It helps us understand global weather patterns, and it even aids in testing equipment and protocols for space missions, like I had already said. It's where science literally goes to the ends of the Earth to find answers. And that wraps up our tour of these secret labs, secret cities, and inaccessible frozen science stations. I hope you've enjoyed this look behind the scenes at some of the craziest and wildest labs humanity has to offer. I've just got 2 more segments of the show, and then we're going to wrap things up. This next segment is a little thing I like to call Let's Ask AI. Let's Ask AI. And today I kept everything on point with the topic in today's lane. I asked, how might scientific progress have differed if secretive research environments never existed? Without secret labs, we'd definitely have taken longer to develop things like nuclear technology and advanced computing. The intense focus and massive funding these places received helped solve problems incredibly quickly. However, secrecy also blocked good ideas from spreading and created duplicate work. Open science generally moves forward more consistently because researchers can build on each other's discoveries, but during times of crisis or competition like war, the concentrated talent and resources in secret facilities created a special kind of pressure cooker that produced remarkable breakthroughs. The truth is probably that we need both approaches: secretive environments for some high priority challenges and open collaboration for broader scientific progress. Different problems need different environments to solve them effectively. And I like that answer. Pretty straightforward, pretty on the nose. Basically, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and whether or not secrecy is important in that specific scenario. Science is a wiggly, growing, mutating thing that doesn't just have a one-size-fits-all scenario. Let's move on to the last little segment of the show where I talk about just a couple fun facts. Our first fun fact is that Richard Feynman, while working at Los Alamos, became known for demonstrating security vulnerabilities like picking locks on filing cabinets and safes containing classified documents, much to the dismay of security personnel. I'm sure he upset quite a few people by being an unneeded lock picker like this, but also probably helped tighten up security. Our next fun fact is that Bletchley Park had extensive document security protocols, including specialized furnaces that continuously destroyed classified materials to prevent any information leaks about their code-breaking operations. Our next and final fun fact is Antarctica's Amundsen Scott South Pole Station, one of the ones we talked about, has a tradition called the 300 Club, where participants sit in a sauna heated to 200 degrees Fahrenheit and then run outside in sub-zero temperatures when it reaches around negative 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and they experience a 300-degree temperature swing in seconds. That sounds exhilarating, and oddly, I think I'd be in. I'd join the 300 Club. And there you have it, folks. Our tour of science's hidden cities and secret laboratories, from code-breaking British mansions to classified American desert towns, Soviet scientific utopias, and the ultimate in remote research outposts. These places remind us that sometimes the most world-changing discoveries happen not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. The work done in these facilities, breaking unbreakable codes, developing radar, creating atomic weapons, advancing space technology, and understanding our planet's history, has shaped the modern world in ways we interact with every single day. They also raise fascinating questions about secrecy in science. When is it justified? What are the costs, both to scientific progress and to scientists themselves? How do we balance national security with the open exchange of ideas that traditionally drives innovation? At what point is secrecy a detriment to security, so much so that it hinders humanity's progress into the next stage of technological advancements? Something we grapple with all the time between all the countries on Earth. So the next time you use a GPS, a microwave, or you check the weather forecast based on global climate models, spare a thought for these secretive scientists who worked behind closed doors in places that officially didn't exist to make it all possible. Like I said at the top of the show, leaving a review, a comment, a like, or whatever you can do on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on goes a really long way in supporting the show. Also, the link to my Patreon will be in the show's notes. Have a glorious rest of your week. I'll see you for the next episode, and until then, don't forget to check on your mental health, and don't forget to check on the mental health of your loved ones. Bye.
Thoughts. Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts. Analog thoughts.
Analog thoughts.